Wait. So you're telling me that you think the Federal Reserve is going to crash the US economy and bring stocks down an additional 25 to 50%?
Actually, I'd say maybe 50 to 60%. And yes, I do believe that is the case. Listen, no Federal Reserve. First of all, the Federal Reserve is a fraudulent Ponzi scheme to begin with. But if we go past that, okay, no Federal Reserve has ever hiked rates into a recession. Now, I know that this administration has moved what the bar of a recession is because it used to be two negative quarters of GDP, but they decided to change that. But I want to know what they're going to come up when we get the third quarter of GDP that's going to be negative as well.
Yeah, when I saw that they were trying to change the definition, I was like, why? We have used the same definition for 100 years. Why do we suddenly need to change it? Now, of course, the election comes to my mind, all of the other stuff that's going on in the country, maybe not wanting to create a self-fulfilling prophecy of tanking the market. But at the end of the day, the market reacts regardless of the White House definition of what's going on.
Oh, I agree. I mean, listen, I tell everybody, you don't need an economist to tell you if we're in a recession or not. Look in your own bank account first. Look at the amount of money you're spending compared to what you're taking in. That'll give you the best idea of whether or not we're in a recession. I mean, every person suffers differently throughout a recession. We bring it in as a very broad scope, but at the end of the day, the average American is struggling right now because interest rates are rising, gas prices are rising, energy, heating your home, air conditioning your home, groceries, you name it, they're going higher. And the Americans are not keeping up with the cost of inflation, no matter what the ridiculous CPI or PPI numbers come out at.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what I want to do is I've been seeing in my YouTube comments, and I get on average anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 comments a day. It's just more than one human can handle. But I'm seeing this pattern of what should I be doing with my money? Is inflation going to get better? How are they going to make inflation better? And like, what do I do with my retirement money? I've got a 401k that's losing value. I've got an IRA that's losing value. So let's talk about the inflation situation, maybe how to improve that, and then what can people do right now with their 401k and their IRA to stop the bleeding?
Well, I think first of all, it really depends on your own personal situation. I mean, me personally, I hedge. I use derivatives to hedge my portfolio, and I actually have a hedging model that I teach to my members. But I believe in staying in the market. The fortunate part about the United States of America is that basically things change every couple of years, right? If you're not happy with what's happening now, 2 years from now, well, actually, in 2 months, we're going to have another election. And then in 2 years from now, we're going to have another presidential election. So if you're not happy with what you have, it changes. We don't have a leader forever. So I think that the biggest thing to remember is that the markets have gone up since inception, 8.5% year over year. And since 1950, they've gone up 10% year over year. The worst thing you can do is panic or puke and sell out at the bottom. Now, again, you have to also analyze what you own. I mean, if you own many high-risk stocks, like let's say Beyond Meats for one, that doesn't make any money, you have to consider getting rid of the crap because, again, it's going to be the companies that make money that are going to survive through all these turbulent times. I mean, you go back to a basic little nothing AT&T stock. If you'd have bought it 30 years ago, $10,000 worth would be worth over $1 million today. So, again, you have to understand that the markets go through these phases, whether they're big or they're small, whether they collapse or not. We're not going out of business. The United States at this point is not going out of business. And I don't think that the companies are either, but you have to be selective on, and I'm not a fundamental guy. I'm a trader. I'm more of a technical guy, but as a fundamental guy, I look for good stocks that I know or in my mind will be in business 20 years from now so that I don't have to worry about those companies knowing that they will survive. And that's, I think, what the average investor has to do. We get too anxious to trade the market. And the last thing is the biggest fault of most investors is when they have to sell something, they go to the winning stuff and sell that, trying to hold on to the dogs. And listen, dogs have fleas for a reason. They stay there and they become bigger dogs. And then you really put yourself into a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's good to dig in, look at the fundamentals. I just did a video where I was comparing a mining company that has tens of millions of dollars and they know that they're sitting on precious metals versus like Twitter, which is constantly on, these talking heads are talking about it. But then I look at their PE ratio and I'm like, this is so out of whack. And yet it's popular to talk about. It's sexy to talk about. So just digging in, doing the fundamentals. Now, I assume the Monday night phone calls, you go over in detail with people what's going on in the market, what you think is going to happen in the coming week.
Yeah, I mean, Monday night, every Monday night, I do a couple of hours actually. I mean, it started out as an hour, and now it's like there's a pregame involved, and I just talk and yap for a while. But I talk anything from, a little bit of what's going on in the world, a little bit what's going on in politics, a little bit what's going on in markets. And then we look at about 30 different futures markets. And then we look at about 30 different stocks. And I give you what direction we are, because I'll disclose my positions all the time, exactly what I have, because I carry 30 commodities and futures overnight, every night, 365 days a year. And I carry all of my stocks. I mean, I'm either trading or investing, but I'm always 100% invested in the market. So I'll go through a bunch of technical reads on stocks, and then I'll answer questions. When we have time at the end, I usually will let 5 or 10 people ask me about specific stocks, which I'll read live, and I kind of leave them marked up. I don't use indicators. I have my own indicator in my mind from being a floor trader. And I was a floor trader for 35 years out of my 44 years in business. So I never had to use a chart, but now I leave everything in place. So when we go back and look the next week, you can see exactly what I told you and exactly what did happen. And of course, we're not always right, but we have a pretty good general idea of where a market should pause, where a market should rally from. You get in these directions that are too parabolic in one way or the other. There has to be some mean reversion, because the markets are mathematical and mechanical, and they don't get sick and they don't get tired. They trade every day.
Yeah, absolutely. You did an interview recently where you were asked, what could the United States do to fix the inflation situation? And I just want to say, because there's a lot of fear out there in my community, in the market, and I just want to echo back the same thing that you said. Like, if you believe in America and the United States and this engine of commerce and buying and creating, then it's always smart to bet on America. But what would you say if somebody asked you? I guess it's me asking you. Like, what are the ways of fixing this inflation situation that maybe the White House and the current administration aren't willing to look at?
They're not willing to look at it. And it's really going back to shale and fracking. I mean, shale producing and fracking oil. I mean, look, again, whether you believe in climate change or not, personally, I do not. But again, I don't care if you believe it, that's fine. I believe everyone should have their beliefs, right? And one of my very good friends happens to be the top Democrat on the Vineyard, all right? And we're happy, he's actually in town, and we were talking last night, and I said, what's going on here? I said, we should be drilling oil. It doesn't change the carbon footprint. Why are we begging Saudi Arabia and Maduro of Venezuela to give us oil when we have the capability here without infecting the rest of the world? In the meantime, because we are not exporting oil anymore, what is happening? We're burning coal everywhere. There's a record amount of coal being burnt. Now, I have no problem. If you have a legitimate plan for green energy, which is fine. Again, I'm not against it. I just don't necessarily believe in climate change. But if you have a plan, give me the plan, but don't put my middle class out of business when you just decide to drop the hammer in one day and say, we're no longer going to shale or frack oil, and that's it. Okay, that's to me is ridiculous and irresponsible of any human being to do that, because we need it to survive. 80% of everything you use or are using in your home is made with fossil fuels. Either shipping it to get it to you, or the actual bottled water is made out of fossil fuels. So we have to use fossil fuels so we can do it without changing the own footprint. And then we have to take into consideration what else? China and India, which represent about 40% of the world, they are never going to stop burning coal. So unless the United States is going to put a dome over it, okay, then we're not going to have much change. We're already the cleanest environment there is. But in the meantime, you have systematically destroyed small business because they cannot compete with the big guys. So basically what you have left is Walmart, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Twitter. I mean, is that what we really want in this country? We want competition. That's what builds better businesses instead of having to rely on the garbage that we have to sometimes put up with because there is no place else to go.
Well, you and I want small business and a middle class, but that doesn't mean that everybody does. But regarding the oil situation, I'm looking at it going, okay, wait a minute. NATO is putting all this pressure on Putin and Russia. And then meanwhile, Russia has now weaponized energy against NATO nations and all of Europe. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If we were really aligned and trying to help our allies, wouldn't we kick on the American engine of energy production and become an exporter? And we would be able to say, Germany, we've got you with oil and natural gas. France.
To being an exporter of oil? Of course we would. Look, the rhetoric that goes on, okay, the Russia defaulting. Russia's thriving right now, okay? They are making more money now than ever. Okay, why? Because they have control of the UK, they have control of Germany, they are the producer. They're going to create a food shortage this year because of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. But again, when it comes to oil, if you really wanted to put pressure on Russia, then you'd have to pump oil. You'd have to bring it out of the ground, go back to a net exporter where we were 2 years ago, and suddenly you could then penalize and have those sanctions take place. Without it, sanctions don't work if you can't put the pressure on the person you're putting the sanctions on, which we have done nothing even close to putting any pressure on Russia. They have become very independent, and of course, they are tied very closely with China. So it's not a great situation for the United States of America.
Yeah, they've got more gold, cheaper food, cheaper gas. They basically, there's this idea of the BRICS nations trying to take out the US dollar, but really all they're doing is they're saying, hey, a dollar is worthless if you don't have food and you don't have fuel and you don't have freedom. Now, some would argue America's more free than Russia. Others would say, I don't know anymore, right? But if you don't have those three F's, fuel, freedom, and food, then you really aren't that powerful of a nation. I don't know why we're not kicking on our fuel production and our food production so that we can, not only be more self-reliant as a nation, but we can help our NATO partners by saying, hey, listen, you sent us baby formula. We're going to send you guys a bunch of natural gas. We're not going to let you freeze in winter. And yet they do the opposite of it. And it just seems so crazy to me.
Well, it's destruction of basically the middle class. It is also part of the fiat currency system, which has no backing underneath it but paper, right? It's taxation without representation, the way they manipulate currencies. Okay. And of course, it's fraudulent what they're doing. And again, this is almost a part of what they're trying to get done, which is the Great Reset, which who wants the Great Reset? Okay. If you can be better than somebody else, why shouldn't you be? I mean, we have given up and diminished a lot of the power of the United States over the last couple of years because of our actions, because of what we've done. I mean, we're almost 99% a service country now. And believe it or not, we're still buying all of our prescription drugs from China. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of buying all of our prescription medicines from someone who's actually maybe an enemy.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I've seen people like Adam Schiff and others that are like, do you know who's funding the Chinese military? It's us by buying everything from them. But yeah, during the COVID lockdown, I didn't realize just how much of our medication and medical equipment comes from other nations, nations that are like regularly like, hey, we're doing a recall because all of this dog food is poisoned, and yet we trust them with our medicine and our lives, So, just something for people to be aware of, having these natural resources. And I remember reading one time that I think the United States is like the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. I mean, we're sitting on so much natural gas. Up in Alaska, we have trillions and trillions of dollars of oil, and yet they won't tap into it because, again, it almost goes back to what you said. Like, when people panic, they sell their best stocks to try to control the losses. And it's the same thing. It's like, okay, we have China and India who really don't care about climate change and pollution, and yet we're policing the small nation that has the best track record. It's like, how much more can you, like, can we squeeze 10% more, pollution reduction? Or do we go over here and like 0.1% would be equivalent to 100% over here? So it's just really, really backwards in their approach to leaving the next generation with a cleaner planet.
Well, they're just not running a business. I mean, they're, again, you might have hated Trump, you might have liked Trump. It doesn't really matter. Okay. At the end of the day, we were more functional and more powerful when he was in charge. Okay. Again, it doesn't matter whether you liked him or not. I mean, just the point is that when he was in charge, we were doing more here on our own, and we had more control of what was going on around the rest of the globe. And we have given up all that control. When you go to your point on natural gas and oil, right now, without going into drilling in areas they don't want us to drill, we've got over a 200-year supply of both natural gas and oil without affecting the environment. Okay, without looking for any more, sitting there waiting to be taken out is over a 200-year supply at basic current usage as of today. And I assure you, 200 years from now, if we're still here, because there's an index called the Vostok Index that believes that the world rotates in 80,000 year cycles. Okay, and that climate change is not climate change; it's part of the natural cycle, and it's happened before, right? So if you look at it, you say, well, why aren't we using this? Because if we're going to use our technology and fix our infrastructure and fix our power grid, okay, then we can get to that green energy if you want to get there. But in the meantime, you're not going to affect or add any more pollution to this country by going back to fracking and shale producing, not to mention the jobs that creates as well.
Well, I mean, you think about it, in 6 months, we've drained almost half of the strategic petroleum reserve, but it's 6 months. But like you say, we've got 200 plus years that we could tap into at any moment. It just all comes down to bureaucratic red tape. But I agree that I do think that would get things going. And then certainly 200 years from now, green energy, renewable energies, they're going to be ready to go. But I asked my community, can you afford a $60,000 electric car right now? And they say no, and they're smart. And they go, wait a minute, if I live in California, I buy a $60,000 to $80,000 car, and then the governor tells me not to charge it. It's like some of the stuff I read in the news every day is just like so counterintuitive.
Well, right. I mean, that's the point, Stephen. We're not prepared to do this. We did not put a good plan together to get to where we want to get to. And again, I have no problem. We want to get there, fine. But let's put together a good plan without destroying the middle class of people, the people that shop, that pay bills, that do things every single day, because you are penalizing that class of people. And that's my class. And of course, my kids and my future grandchildren, again, we're destroying everything going forward, and for no reason. Again, I have no problem with how you want to get there, but give me a plan. President Obama did the same thing with coal. And again, I don't have a problem not burning coal in the United States, but they shut down the coal mines basically in one day. And you have people, in Kentucky, West Virginia, coal miners are almost bred to be coal miners. Okay, they don't have other education. Give them time to get an education. Why stop it in one day? Give our people a chance, because Americans in general will get it done if you give them an opportunity, instead of putting them on like the company payroll, so to speak, or welfare. Get them to work, and they'll figure it out, and they'll get another job, and then there won't be a problem, and you can get rid of your coal. You don't have to burn coal. I have no problem with cleaning up. I have a problem with the way we do things and the way that we run right to giving out benefits for people that are really not benefits, because who pays for the benefits? We do, the middle class.
Yeah. Well, that's why we need a good libertarian to run for office. But that's a whole different.
But I give you a thumbs up anyways.
Yes, yeah, I'll take the thumbs up. So okay. But yeah, I saw just this week the Biden administration is asking to a new definition. Stop calling it the Rust Belt. We want it to be the Silicon Belt or something like that. But the reality is, if somebody has worked in manufacturing or mining or oil rigs or something for 20 years to then expect them to go learn how to code for Google or Apple overnight. And guess what? At some point, Google, Apple, these big companies, they tap out. In fact, they're laying people off right now. They put hiring freezes in place. And so now you have somebody who can't pull a resource that they've been pulling out of the earth for 20 years, and there's no job to code. And yet that's the only answer going forward is, well, learn how to code. You're never too old to learn how to code. And like, I think people are just on to the fact that there's not a real good plan in place.
Well, I'm too old to learn how to code. I couldn't even gather a guess. I mean, again, this is the problem. And this goes back to, again, when you give up everything, you become a 100% service-oriented place. You're putting a lot of people that, you can't replace people that have been in the mines, people that have been fracking oil or drilling oil of their lives. You can't just put them in a new spot. Okay. You just can't give them a computer and say, okay, now start using it, learn how to use a computer. It doesn't work that way. Okay, that's why you keep other industries and you thin them out. So as you educate the younger generation, because certainly the younger kids, most of them can code. It's part of school now. Okay, so they can, as you grow through the generation and pass them through, you get to the point you want to. But now what you've done is create more destruction, okay, and more animosity and more anger among those who can't work because there's no job they can get unless they want to go work at McDonald's. But of course, McDonald's is paying $18 or $19 an hour now, so not so bad.
Yeah, they want it to be 22 an hour out in California. Okay, let me switch gears for a minute, because do you think there's ever a chance of going back to like a gold standard or some kind of mineral or natural resources or energy standard? Because right now, as I see it, is you have the American people, the only printer they have of their own money is their efforts and going and trading money for time or value for time. But they're competing against Jerome Powell in the White House and Congress, who literally exempts themselves from any kind of budget or restraint. How do how's the middle class and lower income families, how do they compete with a government that has an insatiable appetite to print us into oblivion?
No, they don't. And they will never go to another backing. That was, you go back to the Bretton Woods Act. If you look at the Fed and the central banking system around the globe for what it is, it's really nothing more than the cartel. Okay, and what are cartel people? They're criminals. Okay, now again, I can't say that legitimately they're criminals. In the fact they wear a mask and a gun, they can do it legally, because they get the approval from Congress and from the government to continue to do this. If you and I lived like the government lived, we'd be in bankruptcy court or jail. Okay. Well, I mean, why is it that, but voters, this goes back to voting, right? The voters have to put their foot down and say, hey, it's enough. You can't keep spending my money, okay, and expect me to keep paying more taxes and more taxes. I mean, look at the highest tax states across the country: California, New York, and Illinois. Okay, I was from Illinois. Well, I'm still from Illinois, but I live in Vegas part-time, so I'm a resident here. But the three highest tax states in the country that are always broke and looking for more money. Okay, how is that possible? Okay, in Vegas, they don't look for more money for me. Okay, so again, I don't understand. You're not going to get there because they're going to overspend. They're going to overpay themselves. I mean, listen, Congress took a raise during COVID. When people weren't working, Congress took a raise. Okay. Yeah. So they're not going to stop the spending. The only thing that's going to be, the only salvation, which I do believe is a real possibility, is going to be the crypto world. Okay. Yeah. I do believe in cryptocurrencies. I know they've struggled recently. I know there's a lot of government pushback. Okay. But we have to get out of the grasp of the central banking system, or at least get out of the grasp of somebody who can decide to add more to the money supply just because they decided they needed more money. Because really, added money to the money supply is really what? It's really devaluing the currency that's sitting in your pocket.
Yeah, and every nation that's done this, every nation has ceased to exist.
It started in 1600 in England. Okay, that's where central banking started, and it's not a good model. Okay, and anybody who wants to learn more about it from my point of view, read The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a great book. It's a great read, and you'll get information that you'll see. You go, boy, that is exactly what happened. Okay? Yeah, that's what happens.
Has Has there ever been a nation in history that has taxed their people into prosperity?
No, you listen, you can't tax into prosperity and you can never borrow your way out of debt.
Yeah, it's like on Dumb and Dumber. We're in too deep. We've just got to dig our way out of this. It's like, no, you have to stop digging. You have to stop. So,
Exactly.
okay, one more question, and I know that you're a busy guy. Harry Dent has been saying, we're on the precipice of another Great Depression, 70 to 90% loss. We're already down about 20. You say we could go another 50. He's telling people, sell everything you own and move into TLT and ZROZ managed by Allianz, these US treasuries. Do you follow the same prescription, or do you think just be wise about your trades?
I think you be wise about your investing. And I think, and again, I have to say this and warn everybody who's called for the end of the market and the end of the world. I mean, there's guys, and I won't name names, but have been calling for the end since 2010. Okay. Where would you be if you listened to them since 2010? Nobody can predict when this collapse is going to happen. And if the market would actually go down 90%, we would have a lot more problems to worry about than where your money was invested.
Yes.
Okay? Because these other assets aren't going to go up. And if you're banking on the TLT, which is benchmarked against treasuries, and you're banking on the full faith and credit of the government, you ain't going to have a dime left either. Okay, that's what bonds are. The United States bonds are backed by the full faith and credit of what? Of more paper, more debt. Okay, so again, if we're going to get that kind of move, you got a lot bigger problems to worry about. And I can't ever make those types of predictions because I think they're irresponsible and they will create fear in people that shouldn't create fear. Look, I know things are tough, and right now you got the 10-year at 3.5%. I mean, certainly 3.5% is not a bad return. Okay, if you're willing to switch, but what happens is the greed factor kicked in here now, right? Because the market going up for so long, they forced in people that didn't want to be in markets, that wanted a fixed income, and now they got excited because they were making so much, and suddenly now it's going away. But you got the 10 years right there for you, 3.5%. What's wrong with that? It's guaranteed money for 10 years at 3.5%.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, so your advice maybe would be, don't sell everything and live under a rock, but rebalance, be wise about your trades, trust that the American engine will come back at some point. How do people get a hold of you? How do they learn about these Monday night calls? I want to thank you so
first of
much
all, for your people, anybody who listens to this, if they want to come on my Monday night calls, my guest, I will just send me an email at bub@bubbatrading.com. I will be happy to send you the link for a Monday call. Okay. Bubbatrading.com is our website. You can check me out there. I've been a professional trader of my own money for 44 years, and I still trade every day. Okay. So again, if you want to see more about what we do, feel free to stop by. And of course, we do a lot of hedging so that we can stay in the markets without worrying. In fact, we hedge and buy more as the markets go down, because we believe in wealth accumulation and compound interest, which is really what you're doing if you continue to buy. And if you just look in history, okay, we've all heard stories of some guy who you knew never made any real money, dies, and he leaves $10 million to his cat. Well, where do you think the $10 million came from? It came from him leaving his money in the market and letting it compound over time. Because historically, since the beginning of time, it's 8.5%, which means that every 9 years it's going to double. Okay. And you start doubling and doubling, and it all of a sudden becomes real money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. 44 years of trading. That's impressive. That's why I wanted to bring you on here. I wanted to bring a more neutral, centralized position. I try not to get too political, but at the end of the day, politics affects your money. So they can go to bubbatrading.com to learn more.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Please do check it out. You won't be disappointed.
Todd Bubba Horowitz, thank you so much for being on our show today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.